We've heard Isaiah's biblical testimony, and we've heard William Cook's science fiction testimony, and now I want to spin a little tale for you. It's maybe even what my mother's Baptist church would call a testimony, but we'll see how sweaty I get. That's the test. You be the judge. The problem is, I find this story baffling and pretty annoying. Is that good advertising? Are you excited? Okay. These events happened 3 years ago and don't follow any traditional steps that make for satisfying theater. There's no comforting narrative to wrap you up and hold you as it carries you from logical step to logical step, plopping you at a nicely packaged moral. This story, both as it happened and as I tell it today, is full of bothersome holes and incongruent leaps and no moral. It might also make me sound like a fundamentalist kook, so be warned. All I can tell you is, I don't know if I believe me either. So you don't have to believe me. But all the same, this happened. So here we go. A lot of you knew me in the fall and winter of 2012. I had been in a nearly 4-year relationship that had just ended abruptly. It was the start of my 3rd year of seminary, and many of us were preparing to leave for another Judson weekend in Connecticut. The start of the season was coming fast, and I knew I wasn't ready for it. I was in a rut. I was tired and heartsick and unsure of anything that I was doing in my life, especially regarding anything about love or vocation. I was pretty sick of the Bible, and I was pretty mad at God, even though I wasn't sure I knew who or what God even was anymore. I needed a new way, a change. And as I got on the bus with a few dozen of you, I began to cough. Just a shallow cough like this. It was hardly noticeable, but by the time we arrived at our retreat center, this cough came at the end of most every sentence. Some of you may remember it, but it was the kind of tick that mostly goes unnoticed unless it is happening to you. After every sentence, throughout the entire weekend, and after we returned, a few friends would delicately and not so delicately ask what was wrong with me. Many of you know my friends, so you can guess who was delicate and who was indelicate. My right lung had completely collapsed in 2006, so I was convinced that this new cough was evidence of another imminent collapse. But I still didn't go to the doctor. And this continued for several months. After every sentence in September, every sentence in October, November, it started to feel like an old friend who brought strange comfort through incessant annoyance. You know those friends. And this continued until mid-December, when the cough developed into something else. One morning, I woke up to something new, a funny taste in my mouth. I brushed my teeth, and it didn't go away. I went through the entire day, and it didn't go away. I went to bed, slept, and woke up the next morning still there. I tried to describe the taste to my delicate and indelicate friends, but could only say that it was like I'd been sucking on fire, like my mouth was full of cinders. I would ask friends to smell my breath. My friends started to avoid me, either because of the breath itself or because of my incessant questioning. It's still unclear. And this continued for weeks. At the end of every sentence, and the smoldering sense that my mouth tasted and smelled like the bottom of the most horrible cesspool of an ashtray. So, Christmas came around, and lo and behold, a guy asked me out on a date. And spoiler alert, it's my boyfriend Matt, so there's a happy ending. But back then, I panicked. Our first date was on December 28th, and I was still coughing and smoldering. The date ended with Matt offering a kiss, and I had to come out and confess that my mouth was the gateway to hell. But he stuck around. And then the cough and the taste continued. So now it's January, and here's when I realized it was good to be in seminary, because as opposed to other places where people tire of listening to your repetitive laments about your cough that won't go away and the fact that your mouth tastes like the floor of a subway car, in seminary, everybody wants to practice their pastoral care skills on you. So it got interesting. One day in my field education class during a communal check-in, I bit the bullet and declared that I was going out of my mind. Valerie was there. I had been shallowly coughing for over 4 months. My mouth was becoming my worst charred enemy, and I was pretty certain that life was going to continue like this forever. I got to the end of my confession, coughed, and my professor smiled and said, "Isaiah." It's Isaiah and the smoldering coal touching his lips. It's a reminder of your call. So we, like good seminarians, diligently looked up the Isaiah passage, and my postmodern, cynical mind was somewhat tickled by the fact that this passage and my professor's fancy footwork could connect the annoyance of the past 4 months to the texts and faith that I'd been paying tons of money and spending tons of hours studying. I was impressed, but the cough and the taste continued. You can say it with me. But here's where it gets really weird. The class was on a Tuesday, and the following Sunday, I was at a small service I regularly attended where each Sunday we focused on a randomly selected scripture passage. And that day, guess what the randomly selected scripture passage was? Thank you, Isaiah. And as these same words about Isaiah and the coal were read, I kept my calm, cool, cough-fueled composure, even as I silently marveled at those tricks the universe plays just to see if we're paying attention. I was feeling pretty close to this Isaiah guy, closer than I'd ever felt before. But I left the service and coughed my way home, and I woke up on Monday with that old familiar fiery feeling in my mouth. Monday and Tuesday came and went with coughs and that taste in my mouth. Then Wednesday came. I was here at Judson, facilitating one of our Wednesday night events, coughing away and trying not to breathe in anyone's face. The event ended, and I walked to the West 4th Street station as usual. But as I walked down the platform, I heard a voice call out to me, "Mister." I turned around and saw a man, about 50, straggly, greasy hair, unkempt beard, a little dirty, a little like what I look like today, sitting on one of the benches. He asked, "Do you know how to get to Bellevue?" I sat down next to him and told him that the best way might be to ride the C downtown with me and then transfer to a 4 headed uptown. He said he'd ride with me, and then, while maintaining eye contact, he pulled a chain from under his shirt and showed me a pendant, a pentagram. He said nothing for a moment and then asked, "Will you help me? Will you show me the way? Please help me." And then he burst into tears. I said that I would show him the way to Bellevue, but he said they were consumed in fire. I couldn't save them. They were all consumed in fire. I prayed that the sea train would come quickly. Eventually, it did, and we got on. We had 4 stops to go, and I was counting. But my friend maintained eye contact. He asked me again, "Will you show me the way?" I nodded and coughed. "Spring Street." "You'll show me the way?" "Canal Street." He shifted in his seat, motioning for me to look him in the eyes. "Chambers Street." I looked him in the eyes. He leaned forward, and I could feel his hot breath. And he said, "I know they're trying to feed you fire, but if you eat it, it will consume you, and you will die. It is too late for me, but it's not too late for you." And at that moment, his eyes changed. I don't know how to explain it other than to say that there was someone or something else in his eyes. I am actually embarrassed to be telling you this right now. I felt my own imminent death in that moment. I actually thought that he was going to kill me, and I actually was strangely okay with it. We silently held eye contact. Then a voice announced we were at Broadway, Nassau, and the train doors opened. The man's eyes changed. He came back, and the air shifted, and he whispered, "Is this where I get off?" And I whispered, "Yes." And he silently stood up and walked off the train. He never looked back. The doors closed, and I shivered my way into Brooklyn. And the next morning, I woke up, and I noticed that the taste was gone. And then I noticed that the cough was gone. And they didn't come back ever again. So that's my story. I'm sure you all have your own stories, even if they're not maybe as weird. I honestly don't know if I believe everything that I know happened. What I know is that the moment my professor connected my experience to Isaiah's, it ignited something inside me. I saw signs everywhere. The words of that passage followed me. It made me newly curious. It needled me into reading the moments of my life in a curiously theological way. Now, I don't always mind scripture like this. I don't always think of art or poetry or even my beloved science fiction like this. I sometimes approach these things with exhaustion, convinced that I've heard it all before. But somehow that Isaiah passage got inside me, and whether or not it was some trick of nature or just a seminarian convincing himself that he saw signs everywhere, it left me curious. And by approaching daily life, each cough and bad taste in the mouth with curiosity, I got closer to something that sort of resembled theology than I'd ever gotten before. So today, after service, we begin our adult scripture study, Mystery School, as Holly announced earlier. And my goal for the class is to get back to a place where the poetry, the art of sacred texts enliven us to ask questions about our everyday lives every day. Now, growing up in the church, I took the Bible's poetry literally, which is dangerous. Then, in seminary, I learned context and history and stopped thinking about it literally, which is good, but diminishes the imaginative power of poetry. Now, it's time to combine the two. pushing ourselves into a newer sort of spiritual relationship with these texts, one that appreciates context, but which truly believes that poetry can affect our lives if we'll open ourselves up to its time-tested power. Connecting to Isaiah's words convinced me to curiously rededicate myself to my vocation and to my call. Now, later in the service, you hear them back there. Later in the service, we'll have 2 baby dedications, 2 opportunities for our community to rededicate ourselves to welcoming and nurturing mini-humans into full-sized, curious humans. The Honeycomb trilogy, like all great pieces of art and science fiction, calls us to question our own lives, our own choices, by showing us the universal in the particular. You and I might never meet some seraphim. We might not be called upon to save humanity by relocating to Mars. We might not even ever have children. But by encountering all of these stories, by opening up and reading our lives the way we read texts, we encounter ourselves in ways we'd never imagined yesterday. We light the coals. We cleanse our lips and embrace new days and new suns and new horizons with a curiosity that will truly shock us out of our cough-filled, bad-tasting, boring habits. So now, to get us back to that river, to open us up to that curiosity, Toby, Travis, and Matt are going to sing for us one of my favorite modern-day hymns. And we're also going to collect the offertory during it, so enjoy.